Oh, my knees. You see, I have to bend over. I'm actually this tall. It's really annoying for the frame. It's pretty great. So, at first I wanted to make a video on horror mods. Quite quickly though, I found out that just about all of these were either Doom mods or mods for Half-Life. Instead, I figured I'd make a video on Half-Life horror mods in particular, if it weren't for the fact that Grey, Mistake, Cry Affair, and Afraid of Monsters were all pretty much the same fucking game. I did find one though that stood out from the crowd, as it says so on my note, being a Silent Hill themed Half-Life mod called Alka Mela, which I really wanted to cover regardless. So, after a good old thinking sesh, I came to the following idea. Dude, Jesus.
Like most RPG Maker games, Tout isn't actually an RPG, but more of a trigger-based adventure game. So, you walk around pressing spacebar in front of various objects, people, and objects until something exciting happens. And this excitement tells the tale of Judith, a young lady whose entire hometown has surrounded itself in a thick fog and weird cryptic dream sequences.
Mysterious indeed.
While Tout certainly has its own original story, its influence from Silent Hill and also David Lynch to an extent is very fucking apparent, to say the least. Even just besides the general theme and aesthetic, it straight up lifts songs and sound effects from various Silent Hill games and Twin Peaks, among some original work as well, and is absolutely filled to the brim with tribute scenes.
Example.
It starts off with you trapped in a house with haunting Silent Hill 4 style, as the exact same pair as seen in Silent Hill 2, and has a pretty awesome sequence set inside of a school that is very reminiscent of Silent Hill 1. None of it's original at all, but I can't say that I particularly mind either. Tout is by and large a Silent Hill game. It has the vagueness, the isolated moments of beauty, the generally quite spooky bits, the few cheeky jump scares, and even the trademark occulty undertones. Being a fan-tran of a fan game though, the writing is a bit meh, but it does have a neat little story despite that. That with the atmospheric drones, which may or may not be stapled together from reused assets, made for one hell of an uneasy experience. Take the house section for instance, where shit's just dark and empty enough because they're in the process of moving to where it doesn't feel homely at all. A big part of this are definitely the tile sets that have a very water painty vibe to them, with the lighting and shadows being baked into the actual textures. It's really droopy, I guess. Mucho sad, which fits with the Lynchy vibe like a rusty key. I am leaving it as vague as that though, as I don't want to give away too much, and it's definitely worth giving a try if you can get it to run. Thing is that the English version has two official links, one of which is dead and the other gets you a glitch version of the game that still thinks it's a demo. Luckily, a horror let's player by the name of Aesthetic Gamer managed to somehow fix this so it works properly in English now. Granted that you can get past the issue that is older versions of RPG Maker running on modern systems, involving such fun adventures like downloading and updating your app locale using command prompt and other things I don't quite remember, considering I did that shit ages ago. In any case though, I think I kinda love this one. What it lacks in originality, it makes up for by just doing what made Silent Hill great really quite surprisingly well, whilst also having plenty of cool and unique ideas to call its own. Recommend. Jasper Byrne is a name you've probably heard before if you're a fan of Hotline Miami, seeing as he did a few songs for the soundtrack. What he also does though is make video games, his most notable one easily being Lone Survivor, a somewhat Silent Hill-like experience about you and your lovely surgical mask trying to make your way past a bunch of zombie-like monsters. Despite the similarities though, I wouldn't really go so far as to call it a fan game per se. I mean, it's on sale for Steam and has more than enough of its own elements to stand on its own, but we all have to start somewhere. And when making a game, doing some mods, or in this case fan games, is a pretty good way to get going. Insert Soundless Mountain 2, an NES-style retelling of sorts of the illustrious Silent Hill 2. Okay, so clearly this isn't a full-on NES-style game like Mega Man 10. It has more of a quasi 8-bit thing going on. The audio, for instance, just seems to use whatever, only then with bit crushers layered over it, giving it an 8-bit-like feel, except not at all. In fact, I might actually go so far as to say that the entire fucking audio department is a bit of a fucking prolapse. I mean, I like bit crushers as much as the next guy, but something about adding them to fucking radio static might just be taking it a bit too far. Thing is, as well, is that literally all audio had its bits crushed to bits, leading to shit blending together into this low bitrate goop. Luckily, the audio-visual presentation is pretty good. The font choice and color palette really look like what I'd imagine a PS1-era game would have looked like if in 8-bit. Not sure if it reminded me of Silent Hill in particular, strangely enough, but there is something very experimental Japanese horror about it. Its biggest strength totally being its portrayal of dingy urban environments, with the blood splatters, the wee fog scrolling past being all cute and shit, and all of the VLC logos scattered around the town. It would be really cool if someone were to actually build a video game around this. And someone did! It's called Lone Survivor! Because this sure as fuck ain't it. All you get to do is just strut around like the sass master that you are, herding around the lying figures and occasionally having a bant or two. It's more of an experience, I suppose. A slow, 15-minute long, kinda janky experience. Where moving up and down is like waving through mud, and every single screen transition is like an obstacle in and of itself. Truly the essence of survival horror. As a hey look what I can do type of thing though, it's okay I guess, but I can't really say that I enjoyed it much either. Fortunately though, its creator went on to do bigger and better things. So I can move on to the next game now. Thank fuck. Upon seeing screenshots of Silent Hill Rebirth, I was like, hey, that's pretty good. Until they started moving, at which point I was all like, no. But then I learned that it was an RPG Maker game, and once again I went all like, hey,
that's pretty good.
Considering the limitations of the engine, this is quite the clever little dickie. Written and produced by Jose Andres Guzman. It stars Jacob Graves, who's a bit sad after his daughter got dead in a car accident. After receiving a cheeky phone call ratting out the location of the dude responsible for said accident,
being Silent Hill,
he then rushes to the scene in PowerPoint fashion. Much like Doubt, Rebirth ripped a lot of sound effects from the games themselves, but also has its own original OST, made by simply dragging and dropping many samples Akira Yamaoka used, but it fits well enough. Also, some of the more guitar-driven, less draggy-droppy tracks are actually pretty fucking tight. And despite looking a bit no, it generally comes sort of almost close to kind of playing almost like an actual Silent Hill game. Surprisingly so even, given how amateur-y it initially came across. It has the closed doors, the puzzles, the closed doors, the notes, the closed doors, and the combat. But instead of them being drenched in goody goodness, they're drenched in fucking smegma. Yeah, it does not play very well, but at least it has all of the right elements and the atmosphere is quite good in some parts. Everything's obviously borrowed, but when walking around the house, for instance, with the rain shitting away in the background, the game can be rather soothing and immersive. Once the lights go out, even with the shitty flashlight, it's almost a bit scary. It partially looks and sounds the part for the most part is what I'm trying to say here. Even though the backgrounds are just modded and are edited models taken from the PC versions of the OGs and then screen capped. Only downside to these is the actual sprite scaling not always agreeing with well, anything. Sometimes it'll look just perfect, and you could totally fool anyone into thinking that this shit looks great based off of a still image. But then, as I said, once you start walking around, it all falls apart, revealing the dungy walk cycle's blatant JPEGery and sudden dude shrinkage. But yeah, I'm not trying to be too harsh here, and it does legit have some cool elements to it, but I guess it's just a bit too fangamey, if that makes any sense. Like, Doubt, for instance, took inspiration from Silent Hill very fucking clearly, even going so far as to outright reference it in the credits, but it also brought its own unique audio-visual flair. And Rebirth, on the other hand, is just a Silent Hill game with bad animation and somewhat poopy writing. The latter specifically kinda damning this project, in my opinion. But in that, it is certainly a valiant attempt at creating a faithful recreation of what made Silent Hill tick. So, take that for what you will, I guess. You saucy little bitch. Mwah. Anyone else think it's kinda weird that people still refer to games like this as Half-Life mods? Question. I mean, yeah, it's a game made in the Source engine, but the same could just as well be said about Half-Life 2 itself. At this point, I feel like calling Alka Mela, Cry of Fear, or Underhell fucking Half-Life mods would be akin to saying Life is Strange was a mod for fucking Unreal, just because it's made in the same engine. Anyway, dumb stupid opening speech aside, Alka Mela is a first-person, puzzle-driven Silent Hill fan game that's easily the closest to actually emulating what made the original games tick. Sure, the mist isn't quite as thick, the darkness isn't quite as dark, and the grain isn't quite as grainy, but it sure as fuck gets the job done as far as I'm concerned. Besides not relying on copy-pasting existing assets, it's also quite the audio-visual treat. The music is fucking great, and sounds a lot like something Yamaoka could have done. And the color palette and textures are spot fucking on, evoking vibes of Silent Hill 2 and 3 incredibly well, nor does it at all feel like a Source engine game, even in the slightest. In terms of the gameplay though, they went for something a bit more original, being that you weren't controlling a visible walking tank and that the combat and monsters are also absent. Instead, Alka Mela's main focus is on puzzles. Essentially, it has two very distinct modes of play. Hey. I'm just going to leave that in. One is the usual, slightly casual exploratory stuff with the light traditional survival horror style puzzles where you often end up stumbling across things as you go. And the other is Big Dick Puzzle Mode, which involves you backtracking to the places you've previously already explored to read very cryptic hints relating to mathematic equations, writing down numbers in .txt files and tabbing out every 5 minutes to get a code for a keypad or something else similarly convoluted. Shit's well made, sure, and often quite clever, but I can't really say that I'm much of a fan. You see, these puzzles are hard. They require lots of backtracking and a rather hefty amount of pixel hunting. Even something as simple as finding a key is way harder than it would be, as instead of said key being named obvious use key, it'll be named abbreviation key. In short, once I explored and had fun, I was left with a strong sense of not knowing what the fuck to do, which then promptly broke my otherwise thick as fuck immersion. It just lacks the straightforwardness of the actual Silent Hill games, where there's usually only one locked door or one padlock, or at least something a bit more obvious, giving you all the eureka feels. But here, those never came. Well, not for me anyway. And again, it's not like this shit's at all bad, as I'm sure it'll appeal to some people, but I just happen to prefer stuffing amulets into amulet-shaped holes over writing down numbers in a TXT files, tabbing out every 5 minutes to make sure I'm doing the do. Also, there not being any combat means that there isn't any tangible threat either, thus greatly decreasing its scariness. Not that I think a game necessarily needs boogeymen to be scary, but Silent Hill, the third one in particular, really excelled in giving you that oh shit, oh no, oh my god, what is that vibe while traversing the other world. But Alka Mela feels more like a puzzle-heavy Silent Hill interpretation of Dear Esther. Which, I guess, is fine on its own merits, but still a bit of a letdown to someone who wasn't a massive fan of the puzzle side of Silent Hill to begin with. To compensate though, it does do some moderately awesome audio spooks. It's like, do you know that one moment from Silent Hill 1 with the crying lady in the bathroom stall that's never alluded to or ever explained?
It's literally there just to freak you out.
Yeah, well, that. There's breathing sounds, baby noises, random bonks and gasps, and just all sorts of freaky creepy stuff that's pretty good for smashing the shit out of your bowels. I wouldn't say that it completely makes up for the absence of enemies, but it sure as fuck is a pretty decent alternative considering the budget and limitations they were most likely working with. Where these moments shine most of all is with the total lack of cutscenes. Just standing there in a slowly moving elevator, unsure of what fate might befall you in your newly found cage, is really quite unsettling. While it's true that the others had bits like this as well, the first-person perspective really enhances them quite substantially. The gore, the fucked up visuals, the cryptic suggestive imagery, and the events otherwise taking place within cutscene are way more confrontational when they're right in your fucking face. It wasn't until after having explored the town for a bit, dicking around in a Chinese restaurant, mucking about a grocery store, and making my way into an apartment building with some of the prettiest music the game had presented me with thus far, that I realized something. I love this game. I love Silent Hill. And this emulates it very, very well on a fundamentally atmospheric level, better than any of the other Silent Hill fan games what I talked about do. Alka Mela is something special, despite it taking the puzzles a bit overboard in my opinion. I think it's pretty safe to say that if you like Silent Hill and haven't played it, just do it. It's free, it's awesome, and a much better Silent Hill game than Downcoming or Homeport could ever hope to be. And it's actually a full game as well, not a wee little experiment or a short little demo-like thing.
It took me about 4 hours to play through.
Recommend.